Hi, everybody. Welcome to the People Productivity Channel. This is a channel where basically you can become a better you. You are the product, and a better you is often the solution. Today, I have on a guest that I had on recently, actually, Donna Brighton. I hope you had a chance to listen to that interview on leadership. But I brought Donna back because her firm, they are experts on virtual working environments. And, we wanted to switch our content over so it's relevant for the current situation everybody is in. And Donna has a lot of really interesting thoughts to share today. Please stay tuned. We're going to look at assessing your current reality, and then we're going to look at creating virtual work success. So we'll go through both of those topics with Donna. And before we start, in case you missed the last interview, and please do check it out, let Donna introduce herself. So Donna, it's all yours.
Yes, thank you, Frank. So just to update your viewers, I think everybody these days is now an expert on virtual working.
Yeah,
And yes, well, we're all doing it now, right? So I guess that makes us all experts. But what's unique about my background is I've actually worked with some large companies through their workplace transformation initiatives, which involved actually transitioning their workforce from being in the office to working remotely. So I'm leveraging my background in helping those companies do the transition and the things that worked and enabled them to be successful, and even some of the watch outs as well. So that's what we're going to leverage today in our conversation, some of those best practices.
Yeah, which is perfect. And, since you're out there in the market working with companies, how do you assess the current reality just in general of, where people are at, where their heads are at?
Yeah. So I would say, Frank, that right now the FUD factor is very high. Now, I
Yeah,
don't know if you're familiar with the FUD factor, but that stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
agreed.
Yes. So that FUD factor is very high. And as a result, I talk about in the space of change that
Mhm.
every individual has a capacity for absorbing so much. And I think for many individuals, they're a little maxed out when it comes to the changes.
I agree with you.
It's not because it's not just about, oh, we're working remotely, but all of a sudden, we're having to learn whole new habits and routines, educating children from home, entertaining children. Like there's no
Yeah.
breaks from whoever you're living with.
Yeah. I mean, just the ability to manage your personal space, to,
Yes.
manage interruptions so you can actually begin to get work done.
Yes.
For leaders to really help manage this fear downwards because there's so
Mhm.
much uncertainty. So,
Mhm.
yeah, this is a really, really important topic. I see much of what you see out there. There
Mhm.
is this uncertainty about the future because when is
Mhm.
this going to end?
Yeah.
What is the impact to the company going to be?
Mhm.
What are the residual impacts down the road?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty serious. So,
Mhm.
when you spoke to me earlier, you were talking about the first four steps that you thought really companies should dig into.
Mhm.
And let's talk about those. What is that first step when they want to look at their current reality?
So you're absolutely right, Frank. And there's a lot of people who say, oh, I've been working remotely, so this is nothing new.
Yeah,
And while I appreciate the fact that there are quite a few people who have been doing this for a long time,
yeah,
that it's important for everyone, regardless of your level of skill in working virtually, to first of all assess your reality. And what I mean by that is not just, what tools do we have, and do I have a stand-up desk and an ergonomic chair? We hear about that, a
yeah,
distraction-free environment, lovely things to have, but what's the current state in terms of the goals that you need to achieve, right? Maybe there's brand new things you need to be focused on. What about your team members?
hmm,
Right? Because many of them are now watching children and dealing with things beyond just their work.
yeah,
So there's this whole new balance that we have to figure out. So assessing the reality, your reality and your team's reality is a really important first step to make sure that you're set up for success.
yeah. I agree with you. And some people were very good at working from home, and
Mhm.
they really had a process. They were good at it. A lot of people were thrown into it,
Yes.
and they're not good at it, and
Mhm.
they need help and support. So they should assess where they are, and they should understand where the various team members are. Who
Yeah.
really needs help? What kind of help do they need?
Yes.
Um, So as you begin to assess this, then, the next thing is making things better, obviously. What do you
Mhm.
recommend people do next?
Yes. So step number 2 is a reset. So
Okay.
resetting expectations and resetting relationships. And they kind of work together.
Yep.
What I mean by expectations and relationships is the way in which you interact with people in a virtual environment is different than in the office, right?
Hmm.
And oftentimes we don't go into the work office and say, okay, Frank, how are we going to interact?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
For
right?
sure.
It just happens,
Yeah.
but we're not in that situation. So it requires intentionality. And I talk about a relationship reset.
Yep.
And what that means is, hey, when are you going to be available? Do you have, what are your working hours? How fast are you going to respond to things? When I send you an email, can I expect a response in an hour? Or, what should I
Yep.
expect? So all of these things you need to talk about so that the expectations in the working relationships are reset. And
Yeah.
then expectations regarding goal achievement,
Hmm.
because chances are some of the priorities and the things that people were working on before have shifted. I've talked to organizations who were doing very large events, and they're moving them to online, so similar work but in a completely different format. Okay, so we need to figure out,
Hmm.
how do we structure our work so that we accomplish our goals? And if those goals are reset, are we certain that every team member is clear and familiar with those new work priorities?
Yeah. And this is so important, that whole notion of leading from a distance
Hmm.
and knowing where people are and helping them through this reset process,
Yes.
which is incredibly important. And, we always recommend that, the people help one another.
Yes.
And, they should be reaching out and just saying, hey, look, this is when I'm going to be available. I'm on
Hmm.
this schedule. Let's see if
Yeah.
we can all understand how each other is really working. So that's key. If you can
Hmm.
ignite that type of resetting of expectations and relationships,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you've made a big concrete step forward. And instead of getting caught up in just work, get caught
Mhm.
up in how the work gets done.
Yes. And just to add to that, Frank,
Mhm.
an example in a virtual environment is that as a manager or a leader, when you're leading from a distance,
Yeah.
have virtual work. Right.
Yeah.
So on a certain day from this time to this time, just let people know you're going to be in this space, in a virtual video conference
Yep.
space. Anybody can jump in and say hi and ask a question. So there's different ways that you can facilitate maintaining that connection, but that's part of the expectation reset. If you do that, everybody
Yep.
needs to know about it.
Yeah, for sure. Very, very valid point. By the way, my system blipped just a tiny bit. Now, I got to tell you, never happens. I've got a great setup. Never happens. I do think that in some ways, these backbones and solutions like Zoom are hitting some peaks, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I made a call a week ago and I got all circuits are busy, which I never get.
Wow.
Yeah, I never get that. And,
Huh.
maybe it was some exchange. It was calling company out on Long Island, but it was, God, I don't remember the last time that happened, actually.
Hmm.
Really strange. So, but yes, these are all really, really important things. And the next thing is they've got to move forward, right?
Yes, yes. So there's that idea that we're in the now, but how do we move from now to what's next? And part of that process helps create certainty. Now,
Mhm.
none of us can predict when things are actually going to come to an end and we're going to stop working remotely. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But regardless, you, as a leader leading from a distance, you can still create certainty about what's happening in the next 30 or 60 days based on what you do know. So, another way that you can help create certainty, not only in your goal setting and the things you're working on, but consider ways of helping your team members skill up.
Mhm.
So if there's capacity for them right now, there's an amazing opportunity to help them learn new skills that can help prepare them for what's next.
Mhm.
Whether it's learning to use your tools better or how to have a good meeting, right? Like we all
Yeah.
think we know, but there's lots of opportunity if there's space in your team member's calendar to go from now to next by preparing and upskilling.
Yeah. And I love the notion of focusing on training the people. And you mentioned using the tools well. So the people who have been using some of these remote tools, well, they should be running little webinars online for their
Yeah.
team, training everybody,
Yes.
because people who are sitting there working and kind of struggling because they're not sure how to use the tool, they're
Hmm.
probably 50% productive.
Hmm.
So a little training, wow, you could bump them up to 75. That's a big lift,
Yes.
and that will help take a lot of stress away from them as well. So
Hmm.
I really,
Yeah.
really, really do like that. So listen, they've, reset relationships,
Hmm.
they've started to move the team forward. I think it's super important that the leaders try to create a sense of certainty here,
Yes.
because everybody's going to be judging their leaders and how well are they actually adapting
Hmm.
their strategies, the
Hmm.
company to the crisis. And, there's something called strategic trust that
Hmm.
humans basically do. They trust the people leading them to create and get them to a good future.
Right. Right.
So they
And
need to do this for real.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And
very important.
one of the ways leaders can do that is the pace of communication. So I don't know if you've read about any of the leaders' practices, but
Mhm.
many leaders in organization have doubled or tripled the amount of interaction they've had with their direct reports, their colleagues, their
Mhm.
teams. So say, for example, used to meet with your team once a week. Well,
Yeah.
now people are meeting Monday just as a check-in, Wednesday status update, Friday just regroup. So there's an increased level in the
Mhm.
frequency of communication. And to your point, that helps create more certainty, right? So I know on this day we're talking about these things, and this day we'll meet again. And in the midst of all the uncertainty, even a routine like that can create certainty.
Yeah. And, that uncertainty creates fear.
It
And you
does.
said in the beginning, fear, uncertainty, doubt. And given humans are wired to most importantly deal with fear so they stay alive, they'll be
Yeah.
consumed with it if nobody does anything.
Yes. Yeah.
So, now you get into this execution mode, right?
Correct.
Reset expectations. And any
Mhm.
thoughts on that for the
Yes.
viewers?
Yeah. So I want to build on exactly what you just said, Frank, is that our brains, when they get stuck in that place of fear and an
Mhm.
anxiety, it can put us in a place of fight or freeze, or, these different responses that we
Yeah.
have to that uncertainty and fear. And so forward action, that idea of executing and accomplishing, is a really powerful way to help the brain snap out of
Mhm.
that challenging place. And so, an encouragement to all the leaders who are watching, that one of the ways to lead from a distance is to remind people of the successes that they've accomplished on a regular basis. So,
Mhm.
for me and my team, one of the things we do each week in our team meetings, that we do a Friday check in as the team, is we actually pause before we start any agenda items. Our very
Mhm.
first thing are, what are all the successes? What are the things we accomplished that week? And it's a really helpful reframe, because there's always a million things that you didn't get to, right? You're like, oh, I
Yep.
wanted to do this and this came up. But to pause and celebrate success
Boy,
enables you to celebrate those things that have been accomplished, and it gives you that sense of forward motion.
yeah, and it's super important when everybody is separated from one another, because
Yes.
informal conversation that happens, kind of the high fives people give one another
Yeah.
for actually accomplishing stuff. Yeah, you
Mhm.
need a venue for that.
Right.
And some people even recommend, if you run using Slack or Teams, having a
Mhm.
channel where that type of conversation
Mhm.
can take place, which is just super important.
Yes.
So you got into leading from a distance a bit, and I think
Mhm.
probably a good time to talk about creating virtual work success by
Mhm.
leading well from a distance. So let's talk about some of these things like managing your culture. What are your thoughts there if you're leading
Yeah.
from a distance?
Well, I have a couple of thoughts. First of all, culture, of course, is just the way you're expected to do things around here, right?
Hmm.
Just the kind of habits and practices.
Yeah.
So, for everybody that is experiencing a new way of working, Frank, this is a perfect time to reset and reevaluate the practices in light of the culture you want to create. Right.
Hmm.
So it's about, how do you get intentional? I like to say culture has a variety of different ways it's formed. It's accidental, intentional or hypocritical. So I'm
Yeah.
going to encourage everyone to have an intentional culture, and you do that by thinking about your values as an organization and how in a virtual environment can you live out those values. Right. So if collaboration is important and you did that one way in an office environment, think about what are the behaviors that we can do virtually to live out that culture. So
Mhm.
really essential there. And then also consider, in light of the work that needs to get
Mhm.
done, what's important from how we work together and the expected behaviors, what matters so you can be successful in achieving your results. So incredibly important.
Yeah. And, your point that this is a great time to burn in, new behaviors and other things.
Yeah. Yes.
Humans resist change except when there's a crisis and they need to survive. They're very open to change and
Yes.
anything that will make them more resilient and perform better at this moment in time. This is
Right.
one of the great times to, flex the organization a bit because
Hmm.
people will be very much more flexible than normal.
Oh, for
So
sure.
this is phenomenal. And I think that
Hmm.
every company should, take this as an opportunity to maybe do some of the things culturally they couldn't achieve before. They can get everybody
Yes.
to focus. They can get everybody to
Yes.
contribute. People are receptive. This is a unique moment in
Hmm.
many ways.
Yes. And Frank, I want to kind of build on what you're saying, because the cultural habits that are in place for an organization, so an
Yeah.
organization that has a beautiful, intentional culture, this is pivotal for them because that will either continue or it can start to disintegrate. And that's what I mean about a level of intentionality at this point in time,
Mhm.
because we are in such a state of flux and change that new habits are going to be built, and they're either going to support the culture you want or take away from it.
Very good point. You're either directing it or you're letting it
Mhm.
chaotically develop on its own, which,
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, that is a disaster.
Yes.
So after, you get a handle on your culture and you're managing it, how
Mhm.
about, then managing the teams? Because you're still at a distance, you've got these teams,
Yes.
what are your thoughts and guidance for people?
So the management practices that have always been encouraged, having one-on-ones, regular team meetings to stay
Mhm.
communicated and connecting with people, are just as important here. Virtual, it's always good to be face to face. There's something really powerful about experiencing somebody visually, not just auditorily on the phone. So, as much as possible, use video. And I think people are getting more comfortable and
Right.
familiar with those video tools. And in addition to that, something that's really important in a virtual environment
Mhm.
as you're managing your team, there's something really interesting, because when you're in an office, people keep track of things differently. So it's essential that you document everything, decisions, discussions, and have a central source of truth. So
Yeah.
this is where everybody getting clear on the tools that you're using and how you're using them, and then
Mhm.
where they can go and find information on the work, tasks, etc. Really, really important right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, some companies have really good online management tools.
Right.
They could share project plans and everything. Some don't.
Yes.
And
Yes.
your advice is really, really well taken. They should immediately get
Mhm.
some kind of shared drive, Google Docs, something where all their
Yeah.
decisions are recorded, whatever mechanism they want to use. If they have Slack, they could set up the decision channel.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. And they should definitely do that before people start to lose track of kind of the commitments and agreements that they've
Right.
come to.
Yeah.
A lot of
And
it is our agreements, the our agreements channel, right?
yes. Yeah. That's a good point. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting because as people are feeling a little overwhelmed by all the chaos, and perhaps their home environment makes it a little more challenging to
Yeah.
stay connected and pay attention, documentation matters, because we may misremember
Yeah.
conversations or decisions. And that's why I'm really suggesting, and this is regardless of what's going on, a key tenet of successful virtual work success
Mhm.
is excellent tools used consistently by everybody and everything being documented.
Yeah. And then creating a culture where everybody can discuss even what was agreed to because we know certain people sometimes don't speak up in
Yeah.
meetings
Yeah.
and having an avenue to revisit stuff where people
Mhm.
say, hey, I didn't fully understand that. Maybe it's
Mhm.
through an email whatever you need to do to make sure everybody has a voice in an online world, I think is very important.
Mhm.
And that way everybody will buy in and you'll get the best thing. But you mentioned also, that you're managing, your work environment. And
Mhm.
certainly one of the most important things that you talk about is managing yourself,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
And maybe we could speak about that for a short period of time.
absolutely. So, one of the things, I've got a virtual work success checklist, and the very first item on it is mindset.
Hmm.
And it was interesting. I was having a conversation with a colleague, and we were talking about today how it's, I don't want to say easy, but often with the stress that people are experiencing, they slime each other emotionally. Because what we don't always recognize or really pay attention to is that our emotional state is contagious.
Yep.
So the question I always pose to managers every morning, think about, what do I want my people and my team to catch from me? So what is my emotional state and what do I
Great way to
need to
put
do?
it.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
they're going to catch something. And, is that going to be positivity and
Sure.
optimism or frustration and annoyance? I mean, it's up to you.
That's right. You could be the cure or the disease.
Exactly.
Since we're talking about the COVID crisis, but I mean, in reality, you're right. It is everything, they do is contagious and
Mhm.
they are transmitting a vibe for sure.
Yes. Yeah. And so to tie into that self care, right now, with everybody working from home and not leaving the home, some ideas for people in terms of taking care or managing yourself.
Yeah.
Think about having a startup routine and a shutdown routine, right? Otherwise, I mean, of course, it's easy for work and home to blend together,
Hmm.
but a way of like kind of positioning yourself to get prepared for work. And part of that can be some inspirational or uplifting reading or a positive quote that helps get your mind in a good place so that you're ready to step into your day.
Hmm. I like that. Starting the day off right is always super important, right?
Yes. Yes.
And then, after they're managing the teams, their culture, people manage themselves,
Hmm.
got to get the work done, right? So,
Absolutely.
and now they have the processes they share to actually kind of pitch in and manage that, right?
Hmm. Exactly. And a couple things to raise here, Frank. So, getting the work done, we talked earlier about once you understand the current
Mhm.
reality and resetting expectations about what is most important in terms of the work that you're getting done, getting everybody aligned to that, tracking and managing.
Mhm.
I have to share the most important factor in all the projects I worked on in workplace transformation was measurement. And what was interesting about it is we can assume or hope or think that, this
Yeah.
technique's going to work or that technique's going to work. But how do you know if you don't measure it? So, what I found in some past projects is by doing some regular check ins along the way
Mhm.
around the work that's being done, the culture that we want to have, and so on, it can be incredibly helpful in ensuring and maintaining alignment. So, I understand you're coming out with a product that can help us all do that
Ah.
better. Tell us about it.
Yeah, we have a remote work diagnostic. It's a freemium tool, and we're actually going into beta on Monday with 13 companies. And
Excellent.
it's super, super simple because
Mhm.
all we companies can sign up online,
Mhm.
send them a note with a link basically that they could distribute out to their people. We do not
Mhm.
need any of their personnel data. We don't need the
Mhm.
org structure. And they send that out, and they have 7 days basically to get the assessment completed on their side.
Mhm.
And the minute the clock ends, they'll get a really, really robust, rich report that we designed specifically for this. And, we look at kind of overall how the company is doing. So we have, 4 very high level questions that I think capture this moment. And
Mhm.
then we look at, passion and mood, this organizational energy. We look at whether people are enabled, which is all the tools and the environment they're in.
Mhm.
We look at how well people are working together. Um, so this thing is, it's powerful and it's comprehensive, and it'll
Mhm.
give people a really good feel for what the most important things are that they should be focusing on now in terms of what's in the way. And it's going to be different at every company.
Mhm. So that's a gift, Frank. I mean, that is so important because I think as a leader, now in my experience and, doing a lot of culture measurement and working on culture, there's oftentimes a gap between what the leader believes is going on in the culture and what's
Yeah,
actually happening, right? Which is the importance of doing the assessments. But having a tool like this where people can deploy on a regular and consistent basis enables you to have those check-ins when everybody's working remote and you
yeah,
can't walk around, right? You can't
that's right.
visually and check in with people and ask them how they're doing. So it's a way to stay connected with your organization, and it's incredibly powerful. So
Yeah,
I highly recommend that every organization implements some type of measurement to check in. Do you have the tools that you need? Are you communicating well?
right.
What's not working? And then what all the things you were talking about from a culture standpoint. And something super important with this,
Yeah,
taking the assessment, having everybody complete it. If you don't do anything with the data,
yeah.
you're going to frustrate everyone.
You make
So
it
it's
on.
not just doing the assessment and reading the fantastic report that comes with it, but my request and encouragement to all leaders is do something with the data, right?
Yes.
And when you're doing something, make sure that your people understand, hey, I got this report back, here's what I learned and here's what I'm doing. I call it
Correct.
connecting the dots.
And we send them this really, it is a beautiful PDF with
Hmm.
all very rich because they can easily just send it to the same people they invited to participate.
Beautiful.
And they can have a meeting and they can go over the
Hmm.
results and
Hmm.
communicate what they're doing. Engagement assessments created this survey fatigue because nobody ever did anything with the data.
Yes.
They
Yes.
tried, hey, we're all going to have little action planning sessions and the teams are going to
Right.
go out. But the fact is, the work life predominantly didn't move the needle very much.
Mm-hmm.
And consequently, people need to just say, look, this is valuable. We're going to work together to solve this. This isn't an engagement assessment that's
Right.
going to do nothing, right? We actually have
Hmm.
to we need your input. Please participate.
Definitely.
Yeah. So
Yes,
I think that's going to be great. And certainly I know you'll be bringing this to, some of your clients as well.
for
And,
sure.
we look forward to getting a lot of people on this. And if they want to
Hmm.
run it once a month, they could do it.
Hmm.
It's certainly up to them.
Wonderful. Yeah,
Um,
that's an incredible gift, like I said, because for organizations right now, if you don't understand the current state of your people and your team, then how are you gonna, adjust and get realigned? We talked about that 4-step process and resetting expectations. This is some data that will help you do that well.
And this will give them a really nice way for them to understand their culture
Yeah.
because, they should understand, what is organizational energy? It really matters. What is enablement? It really, really
Mm-hmm.
matters. Organizational adaptability. How adaptable are you really? You're living it right
Hmm.
now. So it gives them a nice lens to start to evaluate how they're doing, I
Yeah.
think, and grow and learn. So listen, any other thoughts that you want to share today?
Oh my goodness. There's so
So
many
much?
things. So many things we can talk about. I guess my one of the things I've really been reflecting on is self-kindness and
Mhm.
self-compassion. Because right now it's important to remain productive, right?
Yep.
But in the reality of all the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that we're experiencing, be kind to yourself. And there may be extenuating circumstances, challenges that occur. And the more that we can take care of ourselves, the better able we'll be able to lead from a distance and take care of others.
Yeah, yeah. And I love the ending, take care of others, because they should be kind to themselves and they should be kind to others too.
Yeah.
This is a good time for humanity to pull together actually and better
Yes.
itself.
Yes. Yes.
So Donna, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you,
Look
Frank.
forward to sharing the
Appreciate
report
this.
with you. Take care. Bye.